Good evening and welcome to the second in our Ask an Expert series. This time round, we're focusing on entrepreneurship. We have a fantastic panel of Latymerians here tonight, all of whom have experienced the highs and the lows that come with being an entrepreneur. We're thrilled that they've agreed to share their stories and answer your questions in this evening's session. The Ask an Expert series was developed initially with our young Latymerians in mind, although of course many people are making new career decisions later in life too. So wherever you are on your journey as an entrepreneur, we hope you'll use this session to ask the panel any burning questions you may have. Please don't worry about your questions being too naive or uninformed. This evening is all about gleaning as much information as you can from those in the know. These sessions are very relaxed and informal. Vibe tonight is more common room than boardroom, so please don't stand on ceremony. One of the reasons we chose entrepreneurship for this session is because so many of our current pupils, alumni, and parents are drawn to this exciting world of possibilities. It seems to be in the DNA of many in our Latymerian community, the creativity to translate an idea into a business, the ability to think out of the box to problem solve, the confidence to take risks, and the resilience to keep going when the going gets tough. All qualities many of you share and which are vital to the survival of the entrepreneur. So what to expect from this evening? We'll split the session into three parts. The first will be a panel discussion on different aspects of entrepreneurship. We'd ask you to keep yourselves on mute for this part, but do jot down any questions you have for the panel in the chat facility, which you'll see to the right of your screen. In the second part, the panel will answer the questions some of you have already submitted, as well as those in the chat facility, or at least as many as time allows. And finally, we'll move into breakout rooms for 10 minutes or so to give you a chance to speak to panelists in small and each other in smaller groups. But before we kick off, I want to introduce our fantastic chair for this evening, Fran Borman. Fran is one of Latymer's early female pioneers, joining the school when girls were still a minority, an education in itself, I imagine. To give you some idea of her achievements, Fran was voted as the UK's #1 female business influencer, named by Small Business Britain as one of the top 100 most inspirational female entrepreneurs in the UK. Congratulations, Fran. Business-wise, Fran founded the award-winning mentoring program Goal 17 to encourage a mentoring culture in organisations, which also offers life-changing chances for young people. And this is done by pairing up corporate mentors with mentees from disadvantaged backgrounds. Fran passionately believes business for good is good for business, her goal being to help companies get a commercial return for their sustainability initiatives. And with her own unique system, she supported hundreds of organisations to do just this. Along with fellow Latymerian panellists, Adam, Rich and Toby, Fran is a founding member of our Latymerian Entrepreneurs Group, which was launched around this time last year. Welcome, Fran, and thank you for keeping us all in order this evening. Over to you and the panel.
Thank you for such a lovely introduction, Sean, and really great to have everyone here. Thank you so much, everyone, for joining us. So this evening, we have got an amazing panel, and I feel very honoured to be here chairing such a great group of people with very different, as we're going to hear, and diverse backgrounds and avenues around entrepreneurship. And they're all going to be here to honestly share not just the textbook theory, but their lived experience and everything that's got them from leaving Latymer to where they are today. So a really exciting panel. Just to touch on Sean's sentiments, the idea is this is a relaxed, informal way that we can all get together and just chat. We were joking before saying it's a little bit more like common room rather than boardroom atmosphere, maybe not too much Latymer sixth form common room, because we've all been through that and all know what that's really like, but of course we won't speak of such things this evening. So we've got a couple of questions that we're going to hit off straight away with the panel, and then we're going to take some of the questions that have either been submitted to us, and I know that the Latymer team are doing an amazing job now of monitoring the chat, so if you've got any questions as we go through, please do feel free to put them in the chat, and we will, as Sean said, come to as many of those as possible. But let's get stuck straight into this. And the first question, or the first topic that we wanted to discuss this evening, was really about what qualities are needed to be an entrepreneur. What really makes a successful entrepreneur? And to kick us off with that, I'd absolutely love to come to Adam. So Adam, can you kick us off with some information about that?
Hi, thanks, Fran. So I'm Adam. I was at Latymer till 1990. I then went on to Cambridge, to McKinsey, because I didn't know what to do really after college, to Virgin Cola, because I wanted to understand what it's like in a smaller business, and then thought, well, it's time to set up my own smaller business, which was Innocent. That went better than we ever dreamed it would do. Sold that after 15 years and then stepped out into investing now. So I have a little investment business called Jam Jar, and we back entrepreneurs, hopefully like we were 15, 20 years ago, who have the great idea and want to change the world. And so that's a little bit about me.
Amazing. So I'm guessing you have therefore seen lots of different qualities in entrepreneurs. So I'm sure you've got a really strong sense of actually what are the things that make a good entrepreneur? What are those qualities that you would look for?
Well, I think the first thing to say is, in terms of personality types, entrepreneurs come in all types of shapes and sizes. There's not a single mold at all. So you can get introverts, you get extroverts, it doesn't matter. You can be a generalist, or you can know a hell of a lot about something very specialized. You can be very scientific, or you can be creative and artsy. You can be young, you can be old. It really doesn't matter. There's great entrepreneurs in all sorts of shapes and sizes. And I think that's sort of really important. Everyone can do that. However, there are a few sort of underlying qualities that we do tend to see in the more successful entrepreneurs. I think the first thing is there's got to be a set element of self-belief, of confidence that you can actually do stuff. If you're going to work hard, you can change the world and make things happen. And I think that's important, because if you don't have that, you probably won't ever get started. The second thing, there has to be a drive and a sort of resilience, because it's really hard work. It is not the easy option, and you work far harder than you ever have done starting a business than anything else you've probably ever done. So there has to be a reason behind that hard work, and that drive has to exist. That can be many, many reasons, but it's got to be there. I think the third one is you've got to be able to deal with vagary. Starting a business there's not a set pattern, there's not set data, there's lots of unknowns, and if you're uncomfortable with that, you could end up getting frozen. Whereas actually, you have to be able to crack through that and find your way resourcefully through that vagary. I think an obvious point is also you need to be persuasive. Great businesses aren't the single product of one person. You need to bring people around you. You need suppliers that are going to support you. You need customers that are going to sell your product. So that persuasiveness, you don't have to be a great salesperson. You don't have to be out there and hugely extrovert, but you have to be able to persuade people. And I think those are sort of maybe four of the key qualities that we're always looking for.
And that's really interesting, actually, as you say that, Adam, because actually that persuasiveness, if you've got that vision and that drive and the reason to do it, it's almost easier then to have that persuasiveness to really bring people on board with your vision. So yeah, really, and I love the word vagary. I think that's an absolutely brilliant word and a brilliant concept for us all to understand. That sense of uncertainty can be quite challenging, which actually leads us on really nicely. I'd love to introduce Ollie from our panel now, because he's got an interesting background in terms of also how he's dealt with to an extent that vagary and overcoming some of the barriers that you have when you become an entrepreneur.
Hi, thanks a lot, Fran. So just a little introduction of myself. I'm Ollie. I graduated in 2009 and I went to Leeds University, but I jumped straight into the kitchen in all my summer jobs I had. I started off washing up for a couple of years, and I basically just absolutely loved what kitchens brought, the camaraderie that was brought, teamwork that I learned. And then throughout the next 10 years, I worked in Formula One, always in hospitality, always based in the kitchen for the sort of first 4 or 5 years, washing up, and then became a chef for a few years. And then the last sort of 3 or 4 years was logistics and operations side. So I worked for one of the teams, and we transported everything from knives and forks to ovens, fridges, to every race around the world. So I absolutely loved that part of my life. And then throughout that, I was writing business plans for probably 3 or 4 years before I opened Popham's Bakery. There was everything from cauliflower-based pizzas to chicken shops. And then the time came where I just knew what I wanted to do. The idea all clicked, and a time in work that I just felt it was right to jump at it. So set up Popham's Bakery in 2017. We've currently got 2 sites and an online delivery service, and we're opening up a couple more in the next year or so. That's just a little bit about me. In terms of qualities as an entrepreneur, I mean, Adam touched on some that I was going to mention, but all the stuff that you've probably been told: hardworking, dedication. I think energy, being energetic is crucial. You will prepare to make sacrifices. And these are all attributes that I've said you've probably been told before and are vital. However, there are probably a couple of things that I want to touch on in a bit more detail. I guess when I started my journey as Pophams, I was prepared. I thought I was prepared for the attributes I sort of spoke about just now. I worked in a job that was, we worked really long hours, and I thought, I can definitely do this. You just need to work hard. I was used to it. I underestimated it, definitely. I think, to be completely honest, it was the mental side I underestimated the most. It is really important to make sure you are in the best condition possible, keep yourself as mentally healthy as possible, because it can take its toll. It's not like when you're employed and you work in a normal job, you can sort of go home after work. At times you probably sit on the sofa, chill out for a bit. Starting your own business is all encompassing. It's on your mind a lot, and this is just something I think is really important to understand and sort of look after yourself. Burnout is a real thing, and it can happen to you, and you don't want it to happen to you. So yeah, that's really important. Also, I think the most important quality for me and what I see in other people is being a people's person. Look after your staff. They are your business, and the earlier you realize this, the better, I think. I think you'll be blown away by what people can achieve, your staff can achieve, but what people can achieve with given the right direction and your opportunities that you can give them. Keep them loved, happy, and you'll realize that your company can go from strength to strength. It's something that I've focused a lot of my time on. And something that's sort of linked to this, but community, create a community. It's not just the people, staff I'm talking about, but general people around you, whether that's local businesses or your customers. Support them, and they will support you. And when it comes to customers, for my line of work, I guess it's slightly different because it is face to face, but I think you can relate to it in different aspects, but go past that transactional aspect of a customer. They're people, they're really good people, and create that relationship and community. And then just a little touch on something that I guess you might all be worried about, but don't ever be scared you're not good enough, or you're worried about, shall I do it? There's only one way to find out, just do it. Don't take people's advice, take other people's advice, but don't let people tell you can't do it. And just something on that, I think it's important personally not to look at competition too closely. When people sometimes get fanatical about what their competition could be doing, what the market's doing, Adam touched about self-belief, that it really is so important. Don't worry about what anyone else is doing. Back yourself, believe in yourself, and you can achieve whatever you want, really.
Amazing, thank you. And can I ask you, because you're being so open and honest, so have you struggled with sort of imposter syndrome and those kind of things on your journey?
Yeah, for sure, the first 3 to 6 months, big time. And it's throughout. You're always questioning, am I doing the right things? Am I making the right decisions? But yeah, at the beginning, having a shop, people coming in when it's quiet, when no one's coming in, every day, you're telling yourself that you've probably made the wrong decision, and having really good people around you is really important. Talk to them, talk to people, but just, get through it with the people around you. And at the end of the day, you're always going to be good enough.
So that's interesting. So to overcome that is actually that surrounding yourself with people is super important. Adam, I'm sure, just out of interest, Adam, from a personal point, do you still suffer with imposter syndrome and sort of worry these days? Even though we all look at you and go, wow, Adam, is that still something that's a real reality for you?
Of course. What I do currently is investing in other people's businesses, and I've got to somehow get to grips with whether this business in an industry I've never really understood or heard of is going to work. And am I really going to make a judgment on this person who's been maybe got 5-10 years in their industry, and I've got to have, so yeah, absolutely. And as Ollie says, it's completely about having, for me, business partners that you can toss ideas around and bounce your thinking on, so that you can feel more confident your own sort of making your own mind up on stuff. Because trying to do it all in your own head is very, very difficult. So being able to talk to others is the way through.
Brilliant, thank you guys. Well, I want to bring in some other members of the panel as well now, and actually sort of linking from what Ollie said. Ollie, you're obviously in the hospitality sector, right? So talk about vagary. The last 12 months, I can imagine, have been incredibly tough, and so this is maybe a good time to talk about, actually, with everything that's going on in the world, is now a good time or a bad time for entrepreneurs? Now, I'm sure, Ollie, you've got something to say on this, but I'd also like to pull in Toby at this point and ask Toby to join the conversation. So Toby, if you'd like to introduce yourself and tell us from your point of view, is now a good or a bad time?
Great, thank you, Fran. Toby Astor, I left Latymer in 1997. I went to Imperial College, did mechanical engineering, had no idea what I wanted to do. Got offered a job as a wheelman in NASCAR. So I went off to North Carolina to change tires for a living while I did some growing up. Came back, went into corporate finance, spent 10 years with Merrills and Goldman's doing equity research and M&A. Joined Jaguar Land Rover to head up their corporate strategy department, did that for 3-4 years, then moved into customer experience transformation and digital transformation. And I had my aha. Actually, technology is probably more where I want to go to next, and went to become the COO of a digital media agency. And then got offered a job by Salesforce to head up their innovation arm covering the UK and EMEA. So I now head up 4 different teams across different geographies doing innovation for large and small clients, fintechs, as well as Unilever. So very interesting gig. So I've been working with founders for about 10 years. I did start a business in 1997 and it was a complete disaster. And I can probably go into a bit more about that, about what things went wrong. In terms of, is it now a good time or a bad time? I think there's the external environment, but there's also the much more important personal situation. You know, what is your personal situation? What is your risk tolerance? What is your risk reward balance? Do you have the right network? Have you got the right balance of experiences, skills? Have you got the right conviction in your idea? Have you gone out and tried different things? Have you found an idea and said, this is something that just needs to be fixed? There is a better customer experience, there is a better product out there, and I can do it. You know, and if you're passionate about something, then the rest of the world can slightly go hang. You know, that timing can sort of fix itself. You know, and building on part of what Adam and Ollie were saying, you know, if you've got a good co-founder, if you've got a collaborator who can help you and be your partner, and if you found that person, you know, that's a huge support. You know, not everyone on this planet has a full complement of skills. You know, there's a great thing from Creative Abrasion about getting different people from different walks of life. And if you've got that network and that group and you've got a conviction behind an idea, regardless of what's happening in the macro environment, you know, it takes time. You need that resilience. You need to be able to change and adapt your business model. You know, there's never been a better time in some ways to start a digital orientated business. You know, you can cut any situation depending on what your opportunity and what your idea is.
Yeah, really true, Toby. And it's actually interesting, isn't it? Because again, there's a lot of talk about having different people around you. And I think one of the perceptions that I definitely had early on in my entrepreneur journey is you see these kind of big entrepreneurs and you think, you know, they must be amazing people. They got there on their own, and it looks like they got there on their own. But when you talk to them, they all had a network of people around them that supported them. And maybe that, you know, maybe that's why we're all here with the Latymer network, because there definitely seems to be a rebel element to Latymerians, and we seem to have that sort of aptitude that makes us want to push the boundaries a bit more. And this network as itself is an incredible place to kind of match up with people that are also going to help push those boundaries. So that's really interesting. Whilst we're on this topic, I'd also like to bring Taimur into this conversation, because Taimur is running a digital business as well. So Taimur, can you join us and tell us your thoughts in terms of good time, bad time, and a little bit about your business?
Yeah, sure. Hi, I'm Taimur. I'm the founder of Papier, papier.com. We sell stationery online. We're trying to build a category-defining brand in that space. We've served over 1 million customers so far in doing that. I'm also very lucky to have Adam and Jamjar as an investor, so as part of that. Graduated, I think it's in 2007. 2007 from Latymer, and went on to Bain to kind of try and learn how to run a business. Didn't learn how to run a business at Bain, but then started a business, and I'm now learning how to run a business. In terms of the question on is now a good time, I think the answer I'd give to that is there isn't really such a thing as a good time. I think you just now is the best time of all, and people are great at finding excuses about why now is not a good time, because I've got this coming up, or I've got it. But actually, people are mainly trying to make excuses. So I think you've really got to just take the plunge, and you'll know when it's time, because the entrepreneurial itch just gets a bit too much, and it kind of overtakes you a bit, and you can't really think or sleep or do anything without just doing it. So I think that's probably the best indicator of whether now's a good time. But in terms of why is now actually a good time, in terms of physically in this point in time, there are actually a few good reasons why it's a remarkably good time to set up a business at the moment. One is, you mentioned digital. I mean, in a lot of ways, digital has kind of pulled down the barriers to entry for a lot of businesses and brands. I'm in the direct-to-consumer space, so we sell directly to consumers, and that means we don't have to approach a retailer or go to a supermarket and say, can you sell our product? We just go straight to the consumer. And obviously, digital advertising through things like Facebook and Instagram and Google search, that's all meant that it doesn't matter how big or small you are, you can start accessing customers directly. So that's definitely one reason why it's an interesting time, especially now, to build a consumer brand. The other big reason is obviously there's huge shifts going on in the market and in customer behavior. And whenever there are these huge shifts, there are masses of opportunity now in terms of trying to take advantage of changes in how people are behaving, and customer needs and people's needs are changing. So there's definitely a lot of big ideas that are waiting to be born at the moment as a result of these seismic changes and shifts. And then thirdly, I think we'll come on to the topic of funding, but there's a lot of capital in the market at the moment. There's a lot of people wanting to invest in great ideas. There are a lot of funds now who want to do that. So actually, in some ways, it's probably one of the best times to go out and raise capital. In the UK in particular, it's 10 years ago, venture capital was still quite young, and it's now a much more mature space. There are a lot of individuals who are now investing in startups, with things like tax relief and that becoming a much more common way of investing. So for those reasons, it's a particularly good time. But as I said, there's no time better than now. So if listen to your itch is probably what I'd say.
Amazing. Scratch the itch. I love it. Thank you, Tamer. And beautifully segued really onto the next thing, because we also then wanted to talk about what are the next steps. And we will talk about initial first steps, but you segued really nicely into this about getting funding. And this is where I'd like to bring our sixth special panelist on in Rich. Because Rich, hit us off with some information about, actually, if you want to start a business and maybe you need funding to do it, what would be, how do people go about getting funding, and what advice can you give budding entrepreneurs or even existing entrepreneurs about getting funding?
Rich Davidson, I think I was 93. I don't know why it's so hard to remember what year I left the school, but I think it was 93. And I went to Manchester University. I did 3 years up there doing something. I did something called BA Econ, which was a little bit of a con. It let me tell the world that I had an economics degree when I didn't really. It was all history and social sciences and stuff like that I found much easier to do than anything that was particularly technical at the time. And I left that, and I think all I was obsessed with at the time was working for an investment bank. And I got a job, not that easily, but I got a job. And I did that for a couple of years, and I got very close to the guys who I was working with there, and we left, and I had a very early entrepreneurial experience. And I was probably not a natural entrepreneur. I was probably, and I'm glad that Adam allows people like me, introverts maybe, to exist. I was probably someone like that who was brought into a journey by other much more entrepreneurial people. And we set up a company called BrainSpark back then, which was an internet, it was an incubator. Sometimes they called it accelerators, I think more so nowadays. And we went from 0 people, 0 anything, 0 revenue, 0 funding, in September of 1999, right as the .com 1.0 was really taking off. And we had 300 people working within the group at the time, sort of about 6 or 7 months later. That's not just within the incubator, that's within all of the different partner companies that we had under our umbrella, all of the different companies that we put money into. We had raised a total of, I think, probably about £30 million, and we listed on the AIM market in April of 2000. So that's September 99 to April of 2000, from 0 to a market cap of just under £160 million. That was the peak, some people may remember, in April 2000. And I think about 2 minutes after we listed, it was a one-way bet down from that point forward. And we'll get to, I think there's a section later where we talk about failures. So this may as well be my one, which is the biggest eradication of value, if you want to call it even value, in probably 4 or 5 months. After that, I left and I went back and I joined an investment bank again. And I moved to New York for about 15 years. So I had a big break from anything entrepreneurial. And then really sort of 2016 is when I started DAVCAP, which is an investment vehicle which does largely public equities, but also does some private stuff as well. So that's my background. Well, that's a little bit on me. I think when it comes to, what am I answering? This is about getting financial backing. It's people obsess so much, and in part they're right to, but they obsess about the business plan. They either obsess about it because they can't wait to write it down, or they obsess about it because they're so petrified of it and how to put it down. And I think the biggest advice I give people with it is to try and keep it as simple as you can. Have some structure. Differentiate between what you're putting down in your business plan as whether it's or in your deck as to whether it's something which you're going out to customers with, or whether you're actually going to investors. And if you're going to investors, I would keep it very simple. I would have some financials, but not tons of financials necessarily. I wouldn't have, people still put appendices, and appendices in an investor deck are probably, in my mind anyway, as useless as appendices in your human body. So I would drop all that kind of stuff. Keep it focused, keep it simple. Work very hard, I think, on trying to understand the valuation that you're pitching. And there was a show that became very big in the US, which I think came maybe from the UK. The Dragon's Den show in the UK, I think, spawned something called Shark Tank in the US. And it was hilarious. These people that would come on with just an idea, and they'd stand there and they'd tell you that they wanted $100,000 for 5% or something like that. And these things aren't real. And if you're a first-time entrepreneur as well, I think the best thing to do is make your first project work. And I don't mean give it away for nothing. And I don't mean be a mug or anything like that. But your second time round, you probably won't be a one-time only entrepreneur if you're good at it. And your second time round, the basis will be different, but make your first one work. So work with the people that may be able to give you money. And then the last point, because I don't want to go on and on, sorry. I think in terms of advice I give people is to read what it is that an investor does, what their preferences are, what their criteria are, because there's nothing more frustrating than putting that out there for people to see. And then you get people coming to you with a totally different need. And investors tend to be quite disciplined people. They don't just make exceptions. So if I do startups, there's no point in coming to me if you're a second round or whatever, a Series A, Series B, or if I say, I don't do concept stuff and I want some sales, then sort of just listen to and respond to that. I think there's a couple of thoughts anyway.
Brilliant. Thank you, Rich. That's really helpful. And Adam, I'm sure you've got something to add to this about raising finance, but also just generally first steps. If you've got an idea, where do you go with that?
Well, I think what's important to say is that not all ideas need finance. Don't immediately think, I'm going to be an entrepreneur, I've got an idea, I need to get some investors. That's not it. You know, if investors take your most valuable thing, which is your equity in your business, a share of your business. So if you can grow a business without giving anything away, why not do that? And indeed, that's the best way for some businesses to grow. They're not businesses that are ripe for external investment. And over time, things change, so they might not be right initially, and then they may become right. So don't jump straight to the conclusion that you've got to raise money. I think that's really important.
I just add on to that personally, Adam, that we're just launching a new project, and do you know what? I think selling before you build is massively underrated. So we're just launching a whole new tech project, and I've basically sold it and taken deposits on it before we've invested any money in developing it. And that's complete, again, going back to actually what you said at the beginning about having that big vision and being able to get people to join you on that vision. Sometimes that's an incredibly powerful way to start. And you can actually effectively get your investment from customers before you've built it. So yeah, brilliant point on that.
Yeah, and you know, if then your business is right for investors, they'll be super impressed that you've managed to do stuff bootstrapping it without anything or without much money of your own. And if you've managed to find customers that will fund it for you, or suppliers or employees, that's brilliant. You know, that shows entrepreneurial flair and skill. So, you know, do that as much as you can.
Brilliant. And has anyone else from the panel got any other tips then? First steps, it'd be great to hear from some of you, maybe Ollie and Taimur and Toby. When you sort of started out, what were the kind of first things that you did? Ollie, you mentioned about having all these business plans as well in your head. And what was the kind of thing that said, right, how am I going to actually take this forward? What's my next first step?
I guess first steps for us, I mean, we didn't have much to start with at all. And, you know, I was looking for, you know, lots of sites around London. I was looking at properties for about 6 months and came to the realization that we couldn't afford anything. So basically started really small, found a back street, and me and one other guy built did all the building ourselves, watched everything on YouTube. So the experience for me was slightly different to lots of people in the panel, but basically getting really stuck in yourself. And I think going down the line, that's been so beneficial for us as a company, because, you know, me and one other member of staff who was there, we understood the site and everything in that site that was there so well, you know, from building it right up from the beginning. So I just think that's really important.
Brilliant. Thanks, Ollie. And Taimur, anything you'd like to add to that? Oh, maybe I'll come to you.
What did I do first? So I actually did kind of pull together a business plan, but I actually think the exercise of doing that is kind of, it's semi-therapy, and it's also just trying to get stuff down on a page. I think if you are someone who's kind of got an idea in your head, it is quite useful to start putting it down on paper. But I think to the point around not obsessing over it, you certainly don't need it to be, people get very concerned about the Excel model or something. I mean, at the point at which it's an idea, that there isn't an Excel model. So just put down the kind of thoughts. And then I did go out and raise capital and raise some money for the idea. And again, I think Adam's absolutely right. It's definitely not something you need to do straight out of the blocks. It depends on whether your business needs capital, and actually, you know, having equity at the beginning, and the more of it you hold on to, the better. On the flip side to that, I would also, because I speak to some entrepreneurs who are really nervous about giving away equity at the beginning, I would say a couple of things. One is, when it's an idea, it isn't worth anything. So don't be too afraid of giving away a little bit of nothing if actually what you'll be left with is a piece of something very big in particular. And also, as part of that, it really also depends on why you're doing certain things. I think raising capital means you can kind of go through your journey a little bit faster. So if actually you want something, if you want to kind of get to where you want to get to faster, and you don't mind paying for that a little bit, you know, the learning is faster, the journey is faster, you'll make mistakes a lot faster. That's one reason to raise some money. And the other thing I did is I hired people. So having some access to capital meant I could hire some people, and in particular hired my advice is hire generalists early, not specialists. So we had a generalist marketeer and a generalist person in operations, just smart people who can help with a variety of challenges and problems. So that's how I kind of went about it, but it's definitely not the only way. There are thousands of different variations of how you start a business.
Brilliant, thank you so much. And Toby, you were just about to join in as well, so please do share.
So I suppose this is more an observation. I sit on the board of various different startups from the beginning, usually through friends or networks that have asked me to join. And I'd say there's different themes, depends on what the capital requirements have been, but they've all validated their idea from an independent friend, usually who's an expert in the area. They've all raised a very small amount of friends and family money to build an MVP or test the hypothesis out. And the discussion's nearly always been how much equity to give away for buying expertise or access to certain skills or networks. So one of the companies I'm involved in now, we had to give some equity away to someone who's going to join the board of the company, but they would provide particular type of expertise and access that we needed to get to expedite this business idea and get it to market. We needed access to the insurance companies. We needed access to government. So it's one of those things that if you can, it's not always giving equity away for money. Sometimes you need to get that partnership, that collaboration, that skills to get in there. And then you just have to have a sensible conversation about what that's worth to everybody, and that risk.
Brilliant, thank you, Toby, and such brilliant advice here. I don't know about you guys, but I've been taking notes as well myself, so some really great tips. I actually wanted to now go to a couple of the questions that have come in, and thank you to those of you that submitted them. And one that's been touched on a little bit, I'd like to come to Callum, if you're there, and if we are allowed to unmute Callum, because you had a really interesting question related to people, which we'd like to open up to the rest of the panel. So Callum, are you there, and can you unmute yourself? I know you are there because we've been messaging.
Is that working now?
Yes. Hey,
perfect.
Fab, so hit us with your question. So it was a really interesting question.
Absolutely. Well, just say thanks so much to everyone because that was super insightful, really helpful. You've all spoken quite a lot about the value of having people to bounce ideas off in your team. But I guess, how did you actually go about finding those other people to work with you on your first venture?
Brilliant question, Callum. So panel, who would like to share their insights on how do you find either co-founders or other people to work with you? What's the best way to find?
Well, I don't mind answering. I was pretty lucky. My co-founders were my best mates, and it turned out that we were all good at different things, and that was hugely important. And then that combination with the fact that we were friends first and therefore trusted each other massively made for a really great team. But that was very lucky. I don't think it's always the case that you're going to have that. In terms of how we found great people at Innocent, the very first thing we did was put adverts on the bottles. Come and work for us. We knew people, and because we figured the people that would more likely come work for us are the people that drink our drinks. So, and we found quite a lot of people through that way. So it was quite just ask a simple question in a simple way.
I love that, Adam. And actually, how many? I was speaking to another. In fact, it was one of the dragons from Dragon's Den the other day who I'm doing some work for, and he was saying that the skill is a minimal part of it. If you've got someone that shares your passion, generally the rest of it they can learn. And especially when you're starting up, you need people that share that passion. So I love that. Stick the advert on the bottle. Brilliant. Anyone else in the panel want to say anything about finding team members and co-founders and other people to support you on your journey?
Yeah, I'm happy to share my perspective. I'm a sole founder, so I didn't kind of have co-founders to begin with, but I needed to find a team, and it tends to start with people in your network. And for my part, it was people I went to uni with, actually one of whom I was at Latymer with as well. So I studied history of art, so I ended up with a team of art historians who actually turn out are okay at running startups as well. So if anyone is studying history of art at Latymer, there is a future, despite people saying anything different.
Thank you, Tamor. That's brilliant. Anyone else on the panel? Otherwise, we will wiggle on to the next question, because I think there's been some great advice there.
It's slightly related to this, but there's a question put in the chat box to the right from Tess on all male panels. It's interesting because there's quite a scary statistic, which is only 2.7% of female CEOs get access to the US venture capital market, that there is quite heavily skewed. I went to business school with someone called Anu Dugal, who ended up founding a VC firm in New York called the Female Founders Fund, specifically that for that point about how to give more, better quality of capital, and to get the right backing for you. So it's definitely something that I'd say the industry struggles with, and we've noticed as well. But then these special funds are now springing up all over the place.
And following on from that, I'm part of the a government advisory group to get more women into enterprise. And in fact, actually, that was my meeting just before coming here this evening, as looking at pushing that agenda. And we know, and I know from personal experience, women are less likely. So I'm much more likely to try and self-fund something than I am to go for funding. And I know that's a fault of mine, and I've already highlighted it's something I'm doing at the moment. But for women, we are less likely to do it. But also, one thing that we need to get better at is reaching out, finding more role models, and stepping up and saying, "Here I am, I'm doing this." So Tess, I would say it's not quite an all-male panel because I am here flying the flag for us women, and there are many female entrepreneurs. But definitely, my advice for any women wanting to get into entrepreneurship is find role models, find women that are doing it. There are plenty of us out there that are really trying to bang that drum now and get more women into it. And interestingly enough, I saw some fantastic investment statistics that said, actually, if you were an investor, it's a much safer bet and you're more likely to get a better return from investing in a female-led business. Just saying, just putting it out there that is worth knowing. So, so yes, there are lots of women doing those sorts of things. So that is great. I'd also like to move on to just another question now that Guy has asked. So Guy, can we come to you? Because you've got a really interesting question, which I'm sure is going to stimulate some debate. Where are you, Guy? Can you come off mute? And then hopefully if you start talking, we'll be able to hear you. I know you're there. Oh, fantastic.
Yeah, hi. And thanks to all the panel also for sharing all of your thoughts. My question was on the kinds of problems that you decide to tackle. And so on one hand, you can sort of have the big problems which have a really big impact if they work well, but sort of by their nature are a bit more ambiguous. And so you're sort of more likely to fail in them versus these sort of smaller but more well-defined problems that you could do really well at, but have a sort of limited upside to them. And I wonder how you'd sort of compare them.
Okay, so who would like to come that? So large, impactful problems or smaller, well-defined challenges?
I can have a go. There's definitely a counter argument to this, but I would probably go with larger impact. I mean, the right answer would probably say a bit of both, but if I'm going to be forced to pick one, it's larger impact and less well-defined. The reason I say that is because one, I think it's very hard to know exactly what you're defining early on, and some of the best ideas start out quite nebulous. The looser they are in many ways, the more flexibility you have, the more you can pivot and change, and most businesses don't start out exactly how they end up. So I think there's something always attractive about not being super well-defined. As if they are well-defined, you may be more likely to be disappointed if it doesn't exactly go as planned. And actually, the impact point's important because that's what gives you the drive to keep going. So if you've got an idea with a big vision and a big market or a big impact, it doesn't have to be a commercial enterprise, it can be a social enterprise. I think that's something that I find keeps you going and motivated. If that's one answer to the question, at least.
Brilliant, thank you, Tamar. Anyone else want to jump in on that one?
I've got another, a slightly different perspective, which is I think the problem that you should look to solve is one that speaks to you yourself most closely. And then the strategy that you follow to solve it will be determined by the scale of the problem, whether you need a lot of money to solve it, it's a huge problem, or maybe it can be a smaller business without a load of money being funded. So that's another way of looking at it. Do the thing that speaks to you, because that's what you're going to be spend every waking hour thinking about, and most of those whilst you're asleep as well. So that problem has got to be something that is relevant and can motivate you.
Brilliant advice, that, Adam. Anybody else want to jump in on that one? I would also personally say that I think also you can scale your ambitions. So you can have these big visions, and then maybe to get there, you can break it down and create your roadmap to get to that bigger vision. And as your skill and your network and your abilities improve, if you've got that overriding bigger vision, then you can work towards it, which also happens. So again, you can have that flexibility that you don't have to give up on the big idea, but maybe if at the beginning, even if you maybe don't feel capable of doing it, at least make those first steps. And that goes back to what we said before about just start now. At least if you get started, you can move forward. This also leads on a little bit to a question that's come up from Ollie in the chat, who very kindly shared an experience of a business that he was running and that wasn't quite working out. So he's asked, when do you sort of walk away from a good idea, and how do you know when is the right time to walk away versus pouring more money into something that perhaps isn't working? Who can answer that one for us?
Is this the buggy idea?
It's the buggy, yes.
I thought that sounded like a great idea, to be honest. I'm surprised.
Should we just bring Ollie, if you did want to come onto the screen, we'd love to have you. If you wanted to come off mute and just put some context on this for us.
Hi guys, yeah, it was at the beginning of last year. I actually work in PR. My day job is working in PR, but my cousin came up with this brilliant idea, which is buggy leasing. So those of you who have kids know how expensive it is to buy a new buggy, sort of 800 quid, 1200 quid for a brand new buggy that you use for months before realizing actually that you've bought the wrong one. And then you go out and potentially buy another one, and it adds up. But look, we ran it for about 10 months, and the problem we encountered actually was criminality from our customer base. Unbelievably, something we didn't foresee. In that, you know, you'd lease these items to people, and they just disappear with them. And when 20% of your stock has gone walkabout, and you've got people chasing after them, debt collectors, but that gets expensive. And myself and my cousin and a couple of others had put substantial amounts of our own money into this, and it was a difficult decision because we wanted to put more money in, we wanted to keep going, trying to overcome this, but that fundamentally was the obstacle that we couldn't seem to overcome. And we did speak to some potential investors, and they thought, great idea, but you've got to overcome this problem. And very reluctantly, we've decided to walk away from it. So I wondered if any of you had, in your own professional journeys, sort of walked away from any great ideas, and what that experience was like.
So when we had the incubator, we invested in around about 15, 20 different companies, mostly all startups at the time, probably put something like £500,000 into them on average. And then we were there to try and help them to raise further capital later. And we had a lot of instances, and it's partly driven by the cycle at the time, which is not necessarily what has caused your issue in this case, but it's partly driven by the cycle. We had to make some difficult decisions about whether to keep on with a whole host of these businesses, because at the end of the day, we couldn't raise external funding for them. So it was about whether we wanted to continue to put money into them or not. And we had a huge amount of debate internally. And I think it says a lot about, I think cutting things when they're not working is a difficult thing to do, but it's an amazing discipline to have. And I don't think you have to think of it even as it's a shame, or it's lost money, or it's a failure. I think in this case, I wish I understood it better. I can't believe you can't tag these things or do something with them, or take guarantees or something off people, because I think the idea is really quite wonderful. But I think knowing to cut things, and I have to cut things all day long now in what I do, especially even in the quoted markets. If something doesn't work and it's not going the way I think it should, I cut it. If somebody else, it's different with my ideas, but if somebody else comes up with this idea or does something different, or does it in a different way, it doesn't matter. You move on, you move through it. So I'm fairly brutal and able to do that. And I think whether that's a weakness or whether I give up too early on some things, it's definitely the opposing weakness to keep on pushing good money after bad, and to keep on keeping things alive just because you can't see the wood through the trees anymore.
Thank you, Rich. That's a really interesting perspective. Do any of the other panel have anything to say on that?
There's one business I'm involved in at the minute that's had to reposition its business model probably 3 times because the market estimates and there were specific problems with what the customer thing we were trying to address. In those circumstances, we had enough conviction on the overarching what we were trying to achieve that we carried on and put more money in each time. The business, my first business, which I started in '97, I walked away from because we had sort of we had co-founder issues, which we know we were never going to solve. We just had diametrically opposed views of how this business should run, and in that circumstance, it was I couldn't see a way through it. I was young, learning the ropes. So I think it's a very personal thing. It depends on your circumstances, your situation, and whether you're looking to repivot the business model or it's something quite fundamental.
Thank you for that, Toby. That's really helpful. I've got we've only got a couple more minutes, and I've got 2 more questions I want to squeeze in, so we might have to go a little bit quick fire. Firstly, I wanted to come. Emma's asked a question about views on starting something in the US instead of the UK. For example, what are the potential benefits in terms of access to talent and funding if you were looking at starting in the US? Any of our panel got experience of the US market versus UK market?
Yeah, I guess I do. I think if you go back 15 years, it was definitely a more mature, a more advanced offering that came out of the US. I can't really speak for the talent side as much, but I think almost certainly it was, with proper specialist recruitment firms like Egon Zehnder and these sort of people who I think could help companies get up to get up and running much more quickly. From a capital raising point of view, a lot of the models that exist over here in the UK, or even the reason why we created BrainsPark was because of something in the US called Idea Lab at the time. So a lot of the original ideas for developing these things came from the US. I don't think now there's an awful lot of difference, to be honest. I think that both models offer probably a very similar amount of opportunity. It's all globalized. And if anything, with the EIS schemes in the UK, there's not really anything like that in the US that compares in the same way. So I think the UK is probably better now.
And just for those of you who don't know what EIS is, it's a form of, effectively you can register your business for EIS funding, and then if investors invest in your business, they get a huge tax rebate. And Adam, you'll probably correct me, it says 40% is it on EIS and 50%?
Well, 50 or 30%. Yeah,
50 or 30, I'm in the middle. So I personally have invested on SEIS, where effectively for every pound you invest, you get 50p back as a tax rebate. So hugely attractive for investors to get involved in your business. And if you're looking for funding, it's definitely worth considering if your business can be EIS and SEIS registered. And like with all these things, it's not as scary as it sounds, and there are people that can help you through it. We've said that so many times. So I'm going to come to our last question, and Carol, if you are there to come to our last question. Carol's asked a really interesting question about sustainability. Carol, are you there? There you are, Carol.
Hi.
Hello.
Hi, how are you doing? Thank you very much for all your insights. Yeah, fascinating and really inspirational. So our business is Scully Cider. So, I mean, we've done a lot of the hard yards. We make a great cider. We've got good, solid growth. But one of the key things we're hugely passionate about is making a social impact. And, as we're going out to market, we're actually looking at bringing that social impact right into our articles of association. I suppose my question to the panel is, have you had experience with sophisticated investors being turned off by the social impact, potentially taking away from the, financial return? And do you believe that there has been a shift, say, in the past 5 years in terms of that perception of value?
Adam, I can see you nodding.
Yeah, I think it's a really good question. I think as with any business, it's critical to get the right investors for your business. So if your business is about social impact, you want investors who really understand social impact. If they don't worry about them. There are plenty of people who will invest behind businesses because of the social impact. And more to the point, consumers are far more these days up for businesses that have much more of a mission than making money. So it might be a shortcut to actually being a successful business. So absolutely not a problem. B Corp, I don't know if you've heard of that. That's a, you know, that's a big sort of global accreditation where you change your articles of association in the company to talk about having more positive impact than just driving bottom line profit. So, and that is a big movement, and I think that's going to get increasingly well known. So absolutely fine to do.
Adam is giving the thumbs up in the chat to B Corps as well. Anybody else want to jump in on that one? If not, we shall. Richard, are you jumping in? Yeah.
All I'd say is everything that Adam said, yes, but also the thematic has grown so much now that people believe it's something that tends to increase your opportunity for throughput, for sales, for revenue growth, and for anything else. So even if you're an investor who never considered themselves to have a particularly social, responsible angle or care, you probably find that those people still have room and still to acknowledge and to actually be pleased for a social, responsible angle.
Yeah. Brilliant. And what a great note to kind of bring this to a close. So thank you so much, everyone. Now, we're not finished yet. We have some more exciting things to come to. But before we head into our little interactive session next, I just want to firstly really thank all the panelists here and come to each one of them and ask them if you could just give one top tip for those who want to become an entrepreneur. And I know this is a really cruel thing to do because there's loads of them, but just one top tip. And I'm going to challenge you all to pick something different. What would that top tip be? So I'm going to come to Ollie first. Ollie, what would be your one top tip for somebody wanting to become an entrepreneur?
I think my top tip would just you have to enjoy it. You have to enjoy the journey on the way. As we've spoken a lot of us about the difficulties that you can stumble across. Remember that it's the daily thing you're going to be doing in life, and these things you have to enjoy, and that's really important. And yeah, as I've touched on a lot, it's the people around you that can help you do that, and it's the product or whatever you're selling or whatever you've got in your company. It's that that keeps you all going. As long as you're all on that same wavelength, enjoy it, enjoy the journey, and every single day in this journey you'll learn something new, and you learn more than you ever thought. And there are things that I didn't ever know existed, and I didn't know the impact they had on people, and it's a fun journey, and it's something that I think you'll all really enjoy throughout your experience.
Brilliant, thank you, Ollie. Adam, coming to you next.
I'd say just do it. Don't be the person that sat around saying that was my idea, but didn't actually bother doing it. Just make it happen.
Brilliant. Rich, what about you?
Persistence, I think. And if you doubt your persistence, then surround yourself with people who you know will have that staying power to get through it as well.
Brilliant. Thank you, Rich. Toby? Oh, Toby, you need to work your sound deck.
Sorry.
There we go.
Mix-ups. Identify a problem that you want to make better. So genuinely have a situation, find something that you want to sit there and go, I could make this better for the world. And that focus will keep you going through the good and the bad times.
Brilliant. Thank you, Toby. And Taimur, give us our final top tip.
Don't overthink it. It's linked to Adam. Just do it, and don't overthink it. Don't look for there's 10 reasons why you shouldn't do it and why there's a competitor that might come in. Very close to Adam's one.
Amazing. So there you go, everybody. We've got it. Enjoy it. Just do it. Persistence. Find a problem, make it better, and don't overthink it. And I think interesting, one thing that's come up through all of the discussion this evening is all around surrounding yourself with people as well. And how great is it that we're all surrounded here by people where we've all got this connection of this school that brought us together. We all have very different experiences and memories of our times there, and yet it's brought us together with this spirit to support each other and go forward. So thank you so much to our panel. We haven't finished. I'm going to hand over to Sean.
You're exactly right, Fran. We are all one sort of big community, school community. If you're not a current pupil, do join our LinkedIn entrepreneurs group. The link is in the chat facility. If you're a current pupil, don't worry. This will come once you've left the school. Thank you so much to our our chair and our panelists and the audience for asking such great questions. I found it I mean, I'm no entrepreneur, but I found it so inspiring and encouraging. So thank you so much for giving your time. We really appreciate it, and the audience too. Our next Ask an Expert is on management consultancy. That's the 10th of March. Again, you've got the links to Latymer Connects and the LinkedIn group. So it just leaves me to say thank you and good night, and see you soon.